Okay, we're back on, Robert.
Well, hey there. Welcome to another half hour of Cambridge Inside Out.
Inside Out. Yay.
Part two.
Right. Yeah.
Part two.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. So one of the things I might as well just sort of get right off the bat here.
Yes.
You know, this is the year 2020. Municipal election years are 2021. And I have to say, I almost regret doing this. But the thing is that I've been, you know, I do pay attention. I look at the filings with the Office of Campaign.
You pay attention? Of course you do.
It's an illness. I'm sorry. But you know, I pretty steadfastly checked the Office of Campaign and Political Finance for the state to see. You know, the thing is that some people put out press releases, announce they're going to be a candidate. Other people don't do that, but what they do is they do the paperwork with the state.
That. Some people may not know what that is.
Well, the thing is that the way it works pretty much everywhere, but certainly in Massachusetts, is that before you can raise money for, you know, political campaigns, you can't just sort of, you know, go around with a hat.
Right.
You know, you have to declare everything. You have to set up a depository bank account. Any city that says 100,000 or more people has to, that's a requirement for municipal candidates. And Cambridge is beyond that limit. So we have to do that. So you can check with the state, you know, it's very easy. I have a quick link. I just go and check it. And I see if there's anybody who's just filed, you know, on a new organization.
Do you have to do it every time you run for something, or can you have a continued account?
Once you're in the system, you're in the system.
So then how would you know that someone isn't running because they already have?
You wouldn't know if somebody was like
see activity.
Yeah. So for example, if somebody was an incumbent and they had sort of in their heart of hearts discussed with their family and decided they just didn't want to be a candidate anymore, you would never learn it that way. Right. Well, let me not say never, because you might notice that you would notice no activity, or they hadn't raised a dime. But but on the other hand, there are some candidates who don't even begin fundraising until much later in the game anyway. And then there are other people who, I guess wisely, will do some fundraising in December so that they can get, there's like a limit of up to $1,000 per person, used to be 500 per person in any calendar year. So the thing is
they want to get some in before then.
Yeah, so you can see that the ones you know are running are ones who are raising money in December or earlier.
Well, Dennis Carlone had an appeal on.
So Dennis Carlone is the only candidate I know for sure who put the word out to his supporters that he will be seeking re-election. I assume most of them will be, but the thing is that you wouldn't necessarily know that. I mean, you can get indications of it from seeing who's getting checks coming in. You know, or expenditures.
So what happens to the money in that account if you have money left over? Does it just stay in there? And
you know what people sometimes do, if they have, a lot of candidates maintain they loan money to their own campaigns, and then one way to close out your account is you pay back your loan, and then you take the money back out of your campaign account.
So it doesn't just sit there. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So that's one way. The other thing is other people actually donate it to charities and to or to other candidates. You can actually do lateral transfers.
But you can't just use it for yourself.
No, you can't just go on a Hawaiian vacation, you know.
I'm sure
well, I mean, though I have to say, you know, over the years, there are some candidates who are very strict at adhering to the rules. And there are some candidates, and I'm not going to name them right now, who are so lax. It's ridiculous.
How would you know that?
Well, sometimes it's an audit comes through, and then the state calls them on it. I mean, the Better Cambridge group basically got into a little bit of hot water this year because they blew past all the limits in terms of individual, expenditures that were directly benefiting candidates. You know, that was in a violation of their status as a political action committee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they had to write a check for $1,500 to their favorite charity as a play nice in the future prize, right?
And you found that out in public.
You can just go to the site, you know, and it's all there. It's all public record.
Interesting.
But the thing is, there've actually been now 4 new faces. New people who have pulled papers. In fact, actually, let me just sort of go to them here.
You have that on in your.
Hopefully the internet will not completely fight with me here.
I don't think it's the internet; it's your computer.
Anyway. There we go. So is that all visible?
Yeah, visible
right now. Yeah. Okay, so what I've got here, just up here, is just queued up, and I don't know some of these people. Somebody named France Pierre from Water Street, which is over North Point area, I believe. You know, pulled papers early November. but it still hasn't shown up in the registered voter database, which is, I find rather curious. But there is a person by that name works as a caseworker over to Margaret Fuller House, and I presume that's him. The age seems about right. Somebody named Tonia or Tanaya Hicks on Pearl Street filed papers 3 days later.
That's right next door to where I used to live. That's interesting. I used to live.
Is that right? Yeah.
Pearl Street.
And again, registered voter and all that. Yeah, but he was kind of curious that the campaign chair is in Colorado and the treasurer lives in North Carolina. So it kind of makes you wonder about, is this a local campaign or what?
Yeah.
Then another person named Dana Bolster, who lives down on Fifth Street in East Cambridge. That's a name I knew from 2 years ago. I was asking people down East Cambridge, oh, you don't know of any emerging candidates, and that name was given to me. But
is that a man or a woman?
She didn't follow through. But now she most certainly has pulled papers this year. That doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a candidate, by
exactly,
the way.
Right.
But curiously is listed both not only as candidate, but the chair of the committee and the treasurer of the committee, and that's simply not done. But I guess
really?
As a placeholder, sometimes when you file papers, you just need to put something down and you haven't worked out the details and they'll work that out later.
Oh, right. You couldn't be your own well, I guess you could be your own campaign chair, no?
You could,
no?
Well, I don't know if you could. Maybe you can be your own chair. You can't be your own treasurer ultimately because
well, that would be a conflict of interest.
You can't actually solicit funds directly in some ways as the candidate, but the treasurer can, and there are some rules. I don't even remember all the rules. For me, of the people who have officially filed, the one I find most interesting is a fellow named Joe McGuirk, who lives down on Columbia Street, who is he used to tend bar at the B-Side Lounge, but now works over at Highland Kitchen in Somerville. Actually, nobody in that business is really working right now, so he's got some time. But seems like a very interesting kind of a regular person, we've sort of been having this phenomenon in recent years of these candidates that are coming out of who knows where, who are not particularly well rooted here. So whenever I see somebody who's like a regular working stiff, who's well rooted in Cambridge, live here.
How do you know he has been living here for a while?
Yes. Well, I have access to the registered voter database, and I look people up and I see who regular voters are. I mean, that's how we found out that Jivan Sabrina Wheeler had only blown into town a year before he ran as a candidate,
No.
Yeah, he hadn't even lived here for more than like a year. And sometimes it's because somebody's just fresh as a student or something like that. But, so I find candidates like to be very interesting. One other person who is strongly rumored actually, is Patrick Barrett.
Wow.
I don't know for sure whether he'll follow through on it, but, Patrick has actually been the author of many of the zoning, most successful and creative zoning petitions that have come before the city in recent years. He's really quite well respected in this regard, and he's also been a real mover shaker with the Central Square Business Improvement District. So, I mean, if he wants to follow through with this and take the grief that comes with candidacy, it'll be very interesting. Another person who had filed papers several years ago was Theodora Escalas, who's actually the executive director of Cambridge Local First. That's sort of at the rumor stage right now. But, I think there's a good chance that she may actually show up as a candidate as well. So anyway, every day it's something else, and there'll be more candidates to come.
I'm not looking forward to election.
I'm not looking forward to it, quite honestly. But the thing is that on the other hand, I'm not going to make a secret of the fact that I'm a little dissatisfied with the kind of the tone and tenor of the council. And I kind of think we do need to see some shaking up here. And
I mean, a lot of it is colored by, we've been in Zoom meetings since March. So,
and that's not great.
And these are new, there's two new faces, right? I mean, Patty Nolan and are they the newest ones?
Yeah, there's several. Jivan
no, but I mean,
Wheeler,
term.
Patty Nolan.
This term.
Those are the two new ones. Yeah.
So they only came on 2 months before we go into Zoom. So that's interesting to me.
That is, and I don't, I wouldn't wish that on anybody to sort of get, it's trial by fire.
Yeah.
by electronic or TV fire.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there. I mean, I've been following city council business and city business in general long enough to remember a day
Yeah. Yeah.
when elected officials tried, above all, simply to be representatives.
Yeah.
They weren't driven by singular agendas.
Issues,
They
yeah.
weren't trying to, overthrow the government or the world. They
Well,
were,
but some of those counselors would say, I am paying attention, I am representing my constituents, and this is what they care about.
yeah, I
They
think
care about
maybe.
bikes, they care about this, they care
I
about
know, but we are kind of in a period now where there's a kind of an outsized voice for certain organized constituencies.
oh,
And I'm not
yeah.
trying to knock down the bike people, for example, here, but the thing
No,
is they
but the
basically,
whole, I agree. Yeah.
right now there are counselors who are afraid of getting Craig Kelly'd, you know, meaning the thing is, unless you sort of adhere to the party line of a particular advocacy group, we're going to
Which is
make
such a
sure.
shame that, because, of all, talking about bikes, I mean, he was the most, to me, convincing person. He only rode a bike. He didn't even drive a car, and yet he had the most sensible, ideas about cycling in the city. And I can't tell you how much I miss his voice. I mean,
Yeah, but the thing is that to me, maybe that's the greatest irony of all, is
yeah,
that the
right.
person who, and I've been paying attention a long
Yeah,
time, the
yeah,
person who, if somebody said city councilor,
yeah.
bicycle, and put them together, sure, there's Jan
So,
Devereaux, but it was absolutely
yeah,
Craig Kelly,
yeah. And now it's
and the notion that somehow because
yeah,
he didn't play ball with a
with this,
particular
I
advocacy
know.
group,
Yeah,
you know,
they
that they're
just
going to sort of
trained him
thrash
out.
him
I
and
know.
push him right out. This is not a good state of affairs. We need
Yeah.
more human beings, regular people coming in here
And his
wanting to
expertise and his experience. I mean, it just
perspective.
pales in
Yes,
comparison to
yes,
what we have now.
yeah. So I'm definitely
Yeah,
looking at the
yeah,
field of emerging candidates, and I'm looking for people who can just talk sense,
yeah,
and not always be driven by this agenda or that agenda. I
yeah,
just want a person who sort of
yeah,
say, are you going to be a good person, solid on your feet, and learn on the job to whatever degree you need to
yeah.
learn on the job, and then, and represent us,
What do you think the issues will be?
I don't know, because this whole COVID episode here
I
has
know,
been so disruptive, and
I know.
I mean, but on the other hand, it also brings into fine focus some
Yes,
things
that
like
are
the local economy, the
right,
local business community, the availability of jobs, things that
well,
we didn't think as much. Maybe we should have
yeah.
thought about, but
Well, also, well, yeah, okay. I was going to say the homeless. I'm going to use the term unhoused or whatever, but I mean, remember we had the war memorial, that whole building was devoted to the homeless, and now,
I mean, it's all emerging,
yeah,
but listen, I speak to the people on the front line,
yeah,
who will tell you about the warming shelter. He says,
yeah,
I mean, this is sort of just the kind of the craziness of Cambridge sometimes.
yeah.
Basically, the people who are coming for the warming shelter are people coming over from Boston.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I
So the
agree.
thing is,
Yeah,
so it's
I know.
great that we're being very generous and that we're going to
But
do things for people who
I
need
I
help.
agree. You're right.
But are you really solving
Yeah,
Cambridge's troubles? I
yeah,
don't think you are. I think there's a lot of programs, there's a lot of policies that we do
yeah,
that are maybe well intentioned. But the thing
yeah,
is that because people do not think broadly enough
yeah,
about housing or homelessness or
I know.
substance
Did
abuse or
you hear
whatever.
James Williamson brought up a friend of his who, it was a long time Cambridge, born here, or whatever, but because he's not living here right now, he's not considered a Cambridge resident. Can't, I mean, those kinds of things. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's not good.
I know. I think, it's again, no, I guess you can't really sort of say the market's going to take care of everybody, because it really
Oh,
isn't. But
no.
the thing is
Oh,
that but if you think that somehow the city and the city's system, and basically having a city and its various nonprofit partners
yeah,
as the landlords of Cambridge is somehow
right.
going to solve everybody's problems
No,
fairly and
no,
uniformly, no, I don't believe that either.
nope, nope.
So what are you going to do? You're going to take the government as bad landlord, or evil greedy developer as bad landlord. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't see them all as necessarily being. I just don't see that as the best
yeah,
way to handle things, and I never
no,
did.
you're right.
I mean, I still think in the housing issue, which is a bigger
Yes.
topic, of course, and it always will be.
Speaking, yeah.
The
Speaking of
real thing
the,
is that if you're just a person looking for housing,
yeah,
right? You're either going to get screwed by somebody who wants $5,000 for nothingness, or from somebody who says, I'm sorry, you haven't fit the criteria for the application form, so therefore we can't help you either.
Well, there's a
And
lot in
the
between.
biggest deficiency I think we have in Cambridge right now is for the ordinary person just looking for housing that's at a reasonable price that they can afford, that's not necessarily owned by the government, and it's not necessarily in a big building with a concierge,
Mhm.
and, just ordinary housing for ordinary people. And I think we tend to focus on the extremes and not the ordinary sometimes.
There is that housing, and there are usually 3 or 4 people in those apartments in the 3-deckers and 4-deckers, and they're paying $1,000 each.
But we do have a rather golden opportunity right
And there's
now
nothing, I
before
mean,
us.
which
Right
is,
now, the vacancy rate in Cambridge
yeah,
is
oh, I know.
really high.
Oh, yeah, so it is a renter's market. I
It is
mean,
a renter's market. And
yeah.
this is, if ever there was a time for some shuffling of the cards, and to come
Well,
up
but
with a
it's never
better
going to go
hand.
down that much. I mean, I know from, and I won't bring experience, that there's still, there are people that can still afford, a certain amount a month. Those are the people that are.
Oh yeah, and there'll be something for them. There'll always be
Right.
something for them. But I think
Speaking
there are
of,
plenty of
yeah,
opportunities for others too.
I thought there'd be more discussion on the single family, the zoning thing, which there wasn't. And although, was it Patty Nolan that she said that she made a mistake by having the wording being, I forget what it,
Elimination of single family
elimination,
zoning,
right?
right? I think
Where,
Patrick Barrett basically
yes,
took
I
them
heard,
all. Patrick took them all to school
yes,
last night,
yeah,
basically
yeah,
said, look, if you people want to
yeah,
discuss the possibility of
yeah,
altering exclusive single family zoning,
yeah,
don't entitle it, we need to have a discussion to eliminate single family
yeah,
zoning.
yeah,
I mean, the level of BS that I've been hearing from elected officials and advocates on this particular issue is just
yeah.
stunning to me. There are communities across the United States,
Mhm.
including some pretty good sized cities here, where, they pretty much say you either have to have a single family home. You can't even, I think there are some places where
Yeah.
if you have 2 structures on the property, they have to be connected.
No, you're right. I know that
Right.
for a fact. And
So
or
you
you have
can't
to have
even
a
have,
certain, acreage. You can't, yeah.
yes,
Oh, yeah.
minimum, all these sort of
Right.
land minimums or whatever's, that really are problematic, and people need to address them.
Yeah.
But Cambridge, I mean, to me, Cambridge,
Yeah.
where the typical housing stock in Cambridge is not single family homes,
Right.
it's multifamily
Right.
homes and apartment buildings, and they're all over the place. The actual
Right.
amount of single family homes in the city is a dwindling supply now.
Right. But all right, Dennis Carlone brought up an interesting point that
He was
I
spot on.
I didn't even know that, because it's true that when you knock something down, or you're not building up, you're building 4 blocks, because
Right.
there's a code about, like, your house could not be built again,
Well, he
right?
also made the point, and I think
Yeah.
Patrick Barrett made this point as well,
Oh, right.
which is that the thing is, okay, you want to basically make
Right.
turn single family homes like his
Yeah.
into a sort of a non-conforming use. Well, you've just increased the value of my property by $1 million
Right.
because
Plus,
you've made it rare now.
those, and I think Suzanne Boulet brought that up. So you build 3 units or 3, like, I know, in fact, there's a house on Pearl Street, single family. It is now 4 big units. They're going for $1.5 million each.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're not increasing housing
but
for
what's your
whoever,
goal? That's the
so
thing I
what is
want to
the goal?
ask is, if
Right.
you have a city with
Right.
110,000 people, and where there are, most of the city is zoned like residence C1, where you can have,
Right.
they can't build triple deckers exactly anymore. Maybe they ought to modify
Because
that,
of the
but
fire, well, no, because he
there
says
are
it's
some
the
fire
fire
code
code.
reasons for doing
Yeah.
that. But the thing is, you can still have multi-level
Yeah.
buildings.
Yeah.
They just not the classic wood
You
frame
have to have
triple decker,
firewall,
perhaps.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you can have a lot of pretty dense housing still. Maybe they should increase the FARs a little bit here and there to kind
Mhm.
of encourage or maintain what is as what the future should be, right? But the thing is that, sort of saying, like, it's almost sort of like warfare. It's sort of like, look, there's still some parts of Cambridge where there are single family homes. We have to take those over now too. Why?
Well, it's not
Because
take
you
those over.
uniformly, but is
Well,
the idea that you must have everything in Cambridge be
right.
uniformly large in scale and dense?
Is it more
Is
that
that
they
the
want,
goal?
but wait a minute, but isn't it more that if you wanted to build a 2-family or a 3-family in those areas? And could you do it now? Is it
No,
zoned?
but the thing is, so here's what
So
I
that's,
would suggest as a good compromise,
yeah,
is that there are some buildings which are kind of a little too large, but they're
yeah,
single family homes and they may
right.
be underhoused. You might have a one person who's advancing
Yeah.
in years who's in there. So you could operate, have absolute freedom to operate a building as, as Jim Toomey likes to say, as a rooming house. You could rent out
But wait a
rooms,
minute, Robert, you're going against your own, but isn't that what the AHO talked about? It's like you want to be able to give that to
No,
a
that's
non.
not what the AHO is about. The AHO is about to say that if I bought a house and I was allowed to build to this big, but
Yeah.
if Justice Start bought that same property, they would be able to build this big.
Yeah,
That's what the AHO was
but,
about.
but what if you're that example you gave, it's an elderly person, they want to give it, and they want to give it to Just to Start, and so they can make 4 units out of that single family. What's wrong
And
with
they,
that?
um, if that's what they were doing, within the
Yeah,
framework of the
yes,
existing building,
right. But the,
I'm
right, but
I'm good
people
for that.
didn't want, yeah, but people didn't want that because they want to have an opinion about it. And obviously the abutters probably wouldn't want that.
But the thing is, you can
So I
actually,
don't,
there are buildings there. I know of people who are taking triple deckers and turning them into single family homes. And I know
oh,
people who
that's
turn
more, right. Yeah,
they turn 3-family triple deckers,
yeah,
three units into
yeah,
6 units by subdividing them.
yeah.
I've seen all sorts of reconfigurations
Oh,
of
yeah.
buildings. I do think it's a good idea to allow more reconfiguration of buildings.
Well,
I mean,
back in the
a
days,
fine
yeah,
example of that
yeah,
was Patrick Barrett's
yeah.
the accessory dwelling units when he
Oh, yeah,
introduced that very
yeah,
successful zoning petition, which is
yeah,
being utilized, by the way, a
yeah.
lot of places around the city. People are now making habitable space in basements and whatever. The thing is that so the building didn't
Right.
fundamentally change all that much. It just became much more
Well, but
usable.
it's interesting. You're right, because I think I've brought this up before. Back in the days of rent control, when I know of a building that was 4 units, and it was but it was under rent control, and it was proposed that I'll add 2, I'll make and have those be rent control and the others be market. No, no, you couldn't do that. So we would have had 6 units of housing. Now we have 4 that are not. So I'm
You
just
know,
saying things have changed because
but a
now
lot
they
of
would
these
encourage that,
But a
right?
lot of the
Yeah,
Cambridge housing policies
yeah,
are not necessarily based in practicality. They're based in
right.
control.
Well, rent
It's
control, right,
whether it's rent
right,
control
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
control by the housing division of the community development department,
yeah, yep.
or putting it into the hands of one of
Oh,
the
yeah,
partners.
people don't
It's
realize
about
that,
control.
this, right, I know, the
and
small, yeah,
there's a complete lack of faith that anything that's actually
yeah,
out in the marketplace could in any way possibly work,
I
in
know.
any kind of good way.
If
And I
you were a
disagree with that.
property owner, if you were a small property owner, you really were screwed in a lot of ways back
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
Yeah,
But the thing is that city policies don't seem to
yeah.
understand this at all. So
Well,
anyway, so that's
yeah,
up for discussion. There
yeah.
is no proposal on the table
It didn't generate a lot of talk at all, so,
but it's going to turn into a talking point, and we're going to
right, because it's very
basically.
preliminary, you're right, yeah,
Right. So the discussion that rightfully should be taking place in places like
yeah.
Belmont or
Oh,
Weston.
oh, yeah,
In
yeah.
fact, they will not be talking about it in Belmont or Weston at all. But in Cambridge, where we are already providing lots and
Well, wait a
lots of
minute.
good housing.
I wouldn't compare Belmont to Weston. I think it's really
No, no,
different.
no. But the point is that the thing is that the kind of low scale, low density norm that is typical of places outside of a place like Cambridge, nobody's going to actually sort of want
Well,
to change any of
have,
that.
have
But
you gone? Do you ever travel to Belmont, like Trapello, where Belmont
yeah.
Street?
Oh,
They're
yeah, yeah.
building. They're like four-story buildings there
I
now.
know. No, there is some happening, and that's a good
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, but this notion that somehow Cambridge is this
yeah,
little quiet farm-like hamlet that
right. That
hasn't
has to
actually
do
done its
everything.
share of
Right.
producing either
We have
A, housing or subsidized
we
housing,
have more
it's bull.
affordable housing, or the 15% than the other
We are
communities. Yeah,
so far above the state average
yeah,
already,
yeah.
and I think people should stop beating up
Mhm,
ourselves on this.
mhm.
We've done a good job. We're continuing to do a good job. There's no need to sort of like whip ourselves.
Yeah,
Self-flagellation as public policy
yeah,
goes nowhere,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So Anyway, so that's a
Ooh,
little bit of
okay.
that, a little bit of fun. By the way, if anybody
Yeah,
hasn't been to Starlight Square lately,
I was there. Yeah.
yeah, there was, they're doing this opportunity
Yep,
thing, which is like
yep,
little booths,
yep.
and
There's a
and
lot of nice things you get, last minute gifts and things.
yeah,
And
absolutely, and it's great. And for me, by the way, the main thing I like to get out of Starlight Square is I go there and I see my friends. In this period where everybody sort of holed up a little bit, it's kind of nice to know there are a few places I can go and run into my friends.
so you're seeing
Yeah.
your friends there? I don't see anybody I know there.
Every
I
single
can't get
time I
rid of
go
them.
there, I run into 4 or 5 friends.
So they're not the vendors. They're people that are just
Some of them
walking
are
around.
vendors,
Oh, yeah.
they're just a lot of people I know. Some of them I run into neighbors there, and there is a possibility, by the way, even though it's a public parking lot, there are ideas currently being floated by some pretty smart people,
Mhm.
ways in which they could maybe one day they could put some underground parking in that area and
Really?
actually continue to have a public venue above ground.
It's not that much parking they're taking over. Why do they have to even worry about the parking?
I think just as a concession, it would be kind of a good thing. The
But they
businesses
could,
do want that.
well, they could do that. There's one side that you can still have parking.
No, I agree. But the thing is, if you want,
Not that many. Yeah, I mean,
there are some people who somehow think you should wish away all parking needs. And, I'm not of that
no,
opinion.
I'm not either. But the farmers market is there every Monday,
I
all
agree. I
5 months,
agree.
and they
And
take
that
over
would,
half of the lot. So
I know. I'm of the opinion that as electric vehicles start to become more and more the
right,
norm,
yeah.
the impetus to get rid of single occupancy vehicles may actually shift the
Yeah,
other way,
yeah,
because they will not be seen as evil polluters,
right.
and you may actually see a lot
Maybe.
more people with little
All right.
cars in the
We
future.
have
So,
30 seconds left. It's
all right.
so
So anyway, for
yeah,
those who need some
yeah.
trinkets and things, go to Starlight
Starlight
Square.
Square is great.
You'll
They have
love
great
it.
shirts and hats and things like that. And yeah.
Definitely, it's a good time all around. And I've been meeting actually this one vendor who Black Matters,
Oh
that
yeah.
sells some really great stuff, and I
Oh
love
yeah.
them.
There's a
And
lot
they're
of good
locals
stuff.
from the high school originally,
Very good. Oh,
came
I'll
out
have
of
to
our high
check
school.
that out. All right.
Yeah.
See
So
you in a couple weeks.
on Cambridge Inside Out.
Bye.